Thank you. Welcome and thank you for joining us at the service of worship at Elk Grove Presbyterian Church in Elk Grove, California. Today is the first Sunday we're doing something different in terms of our video service. Because there were several issues with video and sending out the whole service, session decided to video and then send out just the sermon, which means you may miss parts of the service that were particularly meaningful for you, and we recognize that, but it was a change that the session really felt we needed to make. So, and we do pray that you will find the sermon to be a blessing to you. The lectionary text assigned, the gospel lectionary assigned text for today is Mark 10, 35 to 45. But I'm going to start backing that up to start reading at verse 32 because it really sets what's coming up and we ought to really understand the context. So I invite you now to listen for the word of God from the gospel according to Mark. Starting at verse 32. They were on their way up to Jerusalem. With Jesus leading the way, and the disciples were astonished, while those who followed were afraid. Astonished and afraid. Again, he took the 12 aside and told them what was going to happen to him. We are going up to Jerusalem, he said. The Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priests and teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death. They'll hand him over to the Gentiles, who will mock him and spit on him, flog him, and kill him. 3 days later, he will rise. Verse 35. Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him. Teacher, they said, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. What do you want me to do for you? He asked. They replied, let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in your glory. You don't know what you are asking. Jesus said, can you drink the cup I drink? Or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with? Oh, we can. Jesus said to them, you will drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with. But to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared. When the 10 heard about this, they became indignant with James and John. Jesus called them together and said, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be the slave of all. For even the Son of God did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. This is the word of the Lord. I want to start with two baseball stories, okay? Story number one, I got to tell you, I had a bit of an existential crisis Thursday night. Game 5 between the Giants and the Dodgers would determine who would go on to the division championship and then the next step to the World Series, okay? Well, growing up in Los Angeles, I had a deep affection for those Dodgers, as you might guess. And even old affections, as we all know, don't die easily. But for the almost 40 years that I've been living now in the Sacramento area, I've really come to love the Giants and to a lesser degree the A's, but that's a different story. Thursday night, which team should I root for? It was a real dilemma. But then I realized whichever team won that game, I could celebrate the win of either of them, either my old affection or my new love. So now I'm hoping that the Dodgers go all the way. Story number 2. I mentioned that my younger son, Connor, who will turn 48 this December, is a very good golfer, okay? But years ago, before golf, in a universe far, far away, baseball was his game. He loved Little League, loved doing the very best he could, loved being a part of the team. And sometime in those years, maybe when he was 10 or 11, I asked him that question that young people always seem to be asked. So, Connor, what are you thinking you'd like to be when you grow up? You know the sort of answers given to that question over the years. I want to be a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher, maybe a fireman. I guess it's fire person. Is that politically correct? Or a police officer or an astronaut. I want to be president. Well, Connor thought for a moment. Then he said, I want to be the center fielder for the New York Yankees. Center fielder. One of the premier positions in all of sports. The position of legends like Mickey Mantle and Duke Snider, and perhaps the best of them all, the Giants' Willie Mays. And for the New York Yankees, one of the absolute premier teams in all of sport, along with, of course, the Giants and the Dodgers. So I said, wow, center fielder for the New York Yankees. Wouldn't that be terrific? I paused for a moment and then said, but you know, Connor, you just might want to have other options in mind. Well, he thought for a moment and then said, well, I guess right field would be okay. Either way, that would have meant working very hard to be the best baseball player he could be, working very hard to make his team the very best it could be. As you may have guessed, baseball soon gave way to golf, and being a professional athlete soon gave way to becoming a financial analyst, and he does that very well. To do something well, very well, and to help those that you work with, and maybe to try to make society a little better, whether it's a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher, a fire person, or a police officer, or an astronaut, even as president. And yet, maybe as center fielder for the New York Yankees or a financial analyst. Worthy ambitions, all of them. But you've probably heard how that question has been asked, when it's been asked more recently, how a number of young people respond. What do you want to do or be when you grow up? I want to be famous. I want to be rich. Not about what you accomplish or what you contribute, but about your stature, how you are perceived by others, how important you are. It's that difference between doing something that will contribute to the world in some way or simply wanting fame and fortune. That can be seen as the very center of today's reading in Mark. Jesus had said, we are going up to Jerusalem, where I will be betrayed and condemned, mocked and spit upon, flogged and killed, and I will rise on the third day. He was talking about the direction that his own life would take, and as he often told his followers, that was the direction that their own lives might take. But from what James and John ask, you've got to wonder what they heard in that. Did they stop listening once they heard Jesus say they were heading for Jerusalem? Did they shut their ears and let their minds shift to the long-held expectation that the Messiah, and Jesus was a Messiah, wasn't he? That Israel's Messiah would march into Jerusalem and overturn the religious establishment and the Roman oppressors. That was the model those disciples were stuck with right then. King as political ruler. Wow, we want to be a part of that new regime. And it says that the other 10 were indignant. not because they had a better understanding of what Jesus was talking about, not because James and John were trying to outmaneuver them for positions of power, okay, and glory. And I'd say that's a story as old as stories have been told, and as contemporary as this morning's newspaper. What motivates people? What motivates each one of us? To be of service or to be served? To seek the best for all or the best for me? To be a spreader of kindness and hope and compassion, or to seek that from others for myself, or to gain attention by stirring up anger and hatred. We know about that in recent years, haven't we? Lots of attention put out their anger, ugly stuff. Think of all the ways that our society reflects that. It's all about me attitude. Me personally, or what will generate the greatest wealth for a particular group of people, regardless of the potential negative impact on other people in our society. Two very current examples come to my mind. Example number one, no one is going to tell me I have to be vaccinated. I have absolute say over my own body. Right. And maybe you're still alive and healthy today and able to say that, only because of all those terrible vaccinations that were forced upon you and your classmates way back when. Thank goodness that the health and well-being of the whole community is sometimes recognized as more important than the sacred right of the individual. Thank goodness that the divine right of kings, which usually means moi, has passed from the scene. Example number two. Maybe you've seen that the leaders of Facebook recently promised to more carefully monitor what gets posted on their platform and to disallow content that is pushing prejudice or hatred or racism or violence. Good move, Facebook. Good move. But maybe you also saw that a former Facebook employee is saying that Facebook had an algorithm to identify and put on its platform exactly that kind of ugly material. Because that company understood very well that anger and hate attract people's attention. And attracting people's attention is what makes the money. And that's what really matters, isn't it? Gaining wealth and power, regardless of the damage it may do to people, particularly vulnerable young people. That's sort of the old model that society runs on, isn't it? Getting what you can for yourself and giving up old models, old understandings, old affections. It's hard to do, isn't it? Which takes us back to today's reading. Professor Matt Skinner of Luther Seminary in St. Paul wrote, Jesus is about to enter Jerusalem and confront the temple-based aristocracy. James and John appear to have missed everything Jesus had said. But James and John are not the only disciples enticed by the visions of a triumphant reign. The rest of the 12 fume over the brothers' bid to outflank them in prominence. Visions of a triumphant reign. Probably not a place in most of our ideas of the visions of what's going to happen. On the other hand, all of us have heard the loud praise for American individualism and American exceptionalism. All of us are impacted by the values and norms of the society in which we live. All of us have absorbed one way or another some of the ugliness that bombards us every day. All of us have heard the negativity, the cynicism, the demeaning sarcasm. And each of us has our own insecurities, don't we? Our own little hurts we may hold on to. Our own half-truths that we take as the gospel truth. And those are hard to let go of, hard to give up. even for the sake of more closely resembling what God creates us to be. People growing in kindness, in caring, in gentleness, in compassion, in hope. But is that kind of change possible? Or are we doomed to stay stuck? And the ugliness just keeps rolling on in our own lives and in society. Again, Professor Skinner. The gospel declares that God, through Jesus' death, will free people from oppression and captivity to other powers, to the constellation of social and political powers that human beings concoct to control each other, the complex of internal conflicts that can constrict our own hearts. Through Christ, people can be restored to membership in the community that corresponds to God's reign. And according to the wider sweep of Mark's gospel, Jesus' life and death and resurrection delivers people from the demonic powers that enslave the world and resist God's purposes. End of quote. That's quite a vision, quite a hope, isn't it? I recently ran across this quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson: "To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else, that is the greatest accomplishment. To be ourselves, our true selves." And what is that true self? Well, I believe that through the power of God's love, I believe we can choose, each one of us, to continue to grow towards the true self God intends us to be. People who know we are loved and valued. People who are free to love and serve others. I pray that that's a choice each and every one of us will make each and every day. Thanks be to God. Amen.